Let me quickly run you through the speaker's profile today. I'm very happy to share Anoop D'Souza is a proud alumnus of our college, a student of the first batch of 2006 pass out. Anoop, welcome to this webinar, and thank you for taking out your time and sparing some valuable moments to talk to our students. Anoop has graduated in the year 2006. He's the first batch of SJEC. I also got some recent insight saying he was the first football captain of the first football team of SJEC as well. I think that should be a lot of interesting to the students. He is currently an experienced finance manager with key strengths in analytics and business management. He also works on people management and critical thinking, well-versed in both startup and large matrixed organizations. He has worked for companies like Amazon, Procter & Gamble, Tesco, Huawei. He's worked for countries like Singapore, Netherlands. Currently, he's leading the commercial strategy for Kellogg's. He is managing the Austria and the Germany. So to say, he's had a lot of career achievements to look at. Let's look at few of them. He has been responsible for setting up a finance team and the processes for Amazon retail in Singapore and led analysis to establish a path to profitability. He also has led the P&G China team, value loss or the avoidance of $6 million by recommending a no-go for major manufacturing innovations in China. For Procter & Gamble, he's also worked in the Netherlands, where he created and used an innovative cannibalization model to recommend revised trade terms. Business grew both top and bottom line in the subsequent 3 years that he worked there. Anoop, we are very proud to present you to this crowd as the first graduate, as the graduate from the first batch of SJEC. Welcome, and I hand it over to you to take it forward from here.
Thanks a lot, Sangeeta, for the introduction. And also thanks to Binu for facilitating this. I'm very happy to talk to all of you. I've got quite a bit of content to go through at this time, but I think we will have enough opportunity for questions later on. I'm going to try and share my presentation. Let me know. Just one of you guys, just let me know once you can see something, and then I start.
Yes, your screen is visible, Anoop.
Cool. So this is our agenda for today. So I'm gonna, Sangeeta gave me a bit of an introduction. I will just elaborate very briefly, and then we'll jump straight into the content, and hopefully we can have enough time for Q&A. As Sangeeta mentioned, I was in the first batch. So I've come with a lot of the engineering background and the technical skills that came with it. I've made the switch into more of a business world and working more in a finance function, but a lot of that engineering knowledge still is useful at this time from a point of view of technical analysis or just talking with engineers or with IT people. When you know the language that they speak in, that's a big asset for me right now. After my engineering, I've done a couple of work stints, firstly with Huawei, more in the IT stream. Then I switched to Tesco. I worked in business analytics there, more in a retail environment. Lots of interesting projects. I moved to the UK for some time and worked over there as well, mainly on developing all the background applications and analytics for all the retail superstores and shops. I then moved to the Netherlands to do my master's in finance, basically in quantitative finance was my specialty. Subsequently, I remember, I think at that time, my kind of scenario was very similar to what you guys are facing right now. So back when I just graduated from my master's, it was 2009, 2010. At that point, there was also another recession coming out from the Lehman Brothers banking crisis and so on. policy measures that were in place back then were very different. Jobs completely dried up. So it was kind of even worse than what we see today. But I think the world has learned a lot from that crisis. And I actually feel that, that right now things are better than where we were 10 years ago in terms of jobs and employment on a global level, right? So by country, things are very different. So after my master's, I was lucky to finally get a break with Procter & Gamble. I worked in the Netherlands for some time and moved with them to Singapore, and that's where I've spent the bulk of my career, about 8 years in Singapore. Subsequently, I was hired by Amazon to launch their new retail environment in Singapore and in Southeast Asia. And recently, I moved to Germany, where currently I am in Hamburg, and working with Kellogg's. And I moved here for personal reasons, as my wife is from around here. So that's a bit more detail. As Sangeeta already mentioned some of these achievements, I won't go a lot into the detail except to say that it's been across companies, it's been in different streams, a bit of technology, a bit of business, and a lot of strategical decisions that resulted in some good results overall. Quick bio, it's impossible to get to know a person even in an hour, so I'll try to do my best in a few seconds. So apart from work, I also liked a lot to play football. I still watch it. I play it now and then. Of course, in the last few months, it's not possible. But this is something that I definitely like to do a lot. I like to travel. I like to go diving, and I like photography. And I think this photo captures all three of those things. So that's a photo I took in Indonesia, and that's my wife there. Not the big sea creature, but the one that's hanging onto the rock. So definitely something that I enjoy. And apart from that, I like to read. These are three books that I most recently read. I think this is a hobby that I would think. I mean, apart from work, the reason that I'm showing you all of this is over the next 10 years, you will take charge of your careers, and you're going to build a lot of skills, and you're going to deliver results in the workplace. But don't forget to also build on your hobbies and your personal interests, because this is what makes your life and your story more interesting as well. I will jump now straight into the content and talking about COVID-19, right? And the scenario that you guys as graduates or recent graduates are facing right now. And I had a question and a poll, so maybe Binu, I'm not sure how you want to manage this, but if we could get some responses, it would be great.
Sure. We'll do that. Give a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, the poll is open. Is there on? The poll is open for participants. Please pick a choice. All right, it's coming in. The answers are coming in. All right, the poll has ended. The answers are moving in. All right, the answers are here. World War I, there's just 1 out of 120. COVID-19, 51. Climate change is 12. Economic recession goes to 22. And no answer
Cool.
31. Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Right.
Cool. Cool. That's interesting, and it's actually what I expected to see. And I mean, this is very personal, of course. I mean, your personal situation dictates a lot of what your responses are. And if it were, I will now jump back into the content again. So I will jump into what my answer is. I mean, my answer here is climate change overall. I mean, yes, you have, and the reasons are, I mean, quite straightforward for me. If you look at the data, COVID-19 right now, yes, it has a short-term impact, and it has an immediate impact, but it's not the biggest threat that humanity faces at the moment. I mean, if you look at the mortality rates, even if every single person on Earth would get infected, the number of mortalities or casualties would be high, but as a species, we would still continue to proceed based on all the data that we have, right? But if you look at climate change, that has the potential to cause basically all of these other things to go up. So the risk of these other things happening to consistently increase. So, for instance, with climate change, if you believe all the data, and there are people who don't believe it, so it's at this point in time, you can still choose to not believe it based on data that you can see or not see. But yeah, you could technically, with climate change, unlock a lot more of these COVID-19 scenarios, right? Because you release a lot more pathogens with extreme temperatures. And what it also causes is a lot of refugees and refugee crises around the world. Definitely where I'm living now in Europe, the further south that you go, the more refugees you see. And that's mainly because of refugees from Northern Africa or the Middle East that come in or do whatever they can to escape, poverty or death, and that increases again the risk of future catastrophes like wars, and definitely increases the risk of further recessions. So in the long term, over our lifetimes, in my opinion, if you look at the worst case scenario, you're gonna face a lot more threats compared to where we are today. Hopefully, we end up somewhere at the best case scenario, close to it, but I mean, at this point in time, it's uncertain. And if you look at some of the facts as well, like looking at where you guys are right now, the differences versus where we are today is going to be quite intense in terms of extreme temperatures or weather conditions. You're going to see a lot more flooding events and cyclones and such. So I think overall, in my point of view, the threat is much more elevated from climate change. And I'm going to come back to why this is relevant for you in a second after this slide. So there's a bit of reading material here, and this is a newsletter that I get from HSBC, and this is their view, for instance, on COVID-19 and what's happening now, right? And if you look at what's happening, yes, it's there's an unprecedented collapse in global demand, but at the same time, as I mentioned before, governments and reserve banks have learned from the previous crises. They're infusing money and doing whatever it takes to to get the things to get the businesses running again. At the same time, you have a lot of focus from the global pharmaceutical companies to try and get to a solution, either in terms of antiviral drugs or vaccines. So theoretically, within the next year or two, you should see a systemic solution to stopping this virus. And at the same time, you see a lot of leadership from tech and apart from the healthcare field and getting solutions. I mean, the reason that we can communicate today from a distance of thousands of kilometers is because we have technological solutions that are working to make borders almost invisible. So in the medium term, what it's actually doing is to accelerate some of the bigger threats, right? So when you talk about environmental and social priorities, COVID-19 is actually going to be helping to accelerate some of those trends where companies are going to be forced to innovate much quicker, because in a scenario where your businesses are your cash flow is getting weaker and weaker, you have to make a decision on either putting your bet on a future technology or trying to revive a previous technology. So this is actually going to accelerate some of those trends, and that's important for you from a career point of view. If you look at, let's see. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, the screen is on.
Got it. Got it. So moving from that perspective to this, right? So my suggestion is that you should think beyond COVID. Recessions are basically a fact of life, and the causes can be different. Like 20 years ago, you had the dot-com recession, and that was just as I was entering my bachelor's. When I finished my bachelor's and started to work, there was an economic crisis because of household mortgages and household debts that started in the US and then spread all over the world. India was largely spared in that crisis because India was not exposed to that level of debt. And then, yeah, I mean, within 10 years, now you have COVID again. So the economic recessions are going to be a fact of life. So I think everybody has to get used to it. It's the way things happen in capitalism. You cannot avoid it. So my suggestion is to think beyond it, and this is a simple chart that I prepared with my opinion again, and you can reapply this to your career choices in the next few months or years on where do you think which industry is suitable for you, or which industry you have a job in, and how do you see that fitting in the larger picture. And for me, the larger picture is coming back to the climate change piece. Like right now, at least over here, for example, I would take the auto industry, right? So automobiles in general, I would put it as unstable and with a low growth potential right now. And I see that happening in Germany, for instance, where the traditional car makers like Volkswagen or Mercedes-Benz, Porsche, they're all struggling to grow revenue significantly, because there's a lot of awareness on the consumer side that these kinds of vehicles or products cause a lot of pollution. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Tesla, and Tesla then I would put up there as electric vehicles and the infrastructure that enables electric vehicles, because this is where everybody needs to go to mitigate some of those biggest threats, right? And if you look at the oil industry as well, when I graduated in 2006 from my engineering, some of the most lucrative jobs back then used to be in the oil industry, and there were maybe a few people who got in, maybe 2 or 3 people who got in, and they started with amazingly high salaries, right? But right now, if you look at the oil industry, it costs more to drill an oil well and take it out than the cost is more than the price of an oil barrel, basically. So it doesn't make sense from an industry point of view. So some of these things are all over the place. So for instance, if you look at IT would sit in all 3 sectors here, and except for the bottom left, you can find IT in all of these, and that's because it depends on which project or which IT project you're going to be a part of. So typically, I'm coming from a point of view of you could actually be in an IT industry that's in the gaming industry, and then you're doing really well, as well as if you're facilitating some healthcare. If you're looking at chip design, for instance, in semiconductors, there's going to be a lot of demand in the next decades for efficient designs that consume a lot less power while still enabling complexity. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities on the top right, but you need to think about where it's leading to. If you're talking about being in IT and working, let's say, for a travel website like Booking.com or Agoda, yeah, there's going to be a short-term instability, but in the long term, the travel industry is going to recover. The question is when, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. To put it into perspective, last year was the best year for the travel industry in more than a decade. So yes, demand has gone down, but eventually you could expect it to recover. But you need to think about, okay, are you willing to bet with that for a few years if that's really your passion, right? And then if you talk about what's really at risk, that's basically any task that is repetitive and can be automated. I think as engineers, your key function or your key job is to create something or to use a tool in an efficient way or make a more efficient tool. And most of that work, most of that kind of work is basically non-repetitive. So I wouldn't be too worried about that if I were you, because it's your job actually to create that automation and to make people's lives easier, right? On top here again, I'm looking at consumer goods. Now you have traditional consumer goods, and you have things like, I mean, these are things like people eat or use on a day-to-day basis. That's not going to go away either, because it's going to be a long-term stable industry. People still need to eat. People need to, I mean, men need to shave their beards and so on. So that's not going to go away. But what's going to change and going to grow a lot more are these new era consumer goods, right? So when you talk about climate change again, I'm not sure if any of you have tried like the Impossible Meat or Impossible Burger, for instance. So this is a new innovation that you have a burger that tastes exactly like beef, but it's completely vegetarian, right? And so technologies like that are gonna change the game and change, gonna keep people's standard of living better and higher, while at the same time not impacting the environment in a big way. So this is the one way to look at where you're going. And the same applies for clean energy and energy storage. There's again a lot of demand in the industry for the most efficient way to preserve or to transfer electricity from one place to another. Right now, with the coal and oil and gas industries, it's not super efficient and very wasteful. So there's still, I mean, if you're in the electrical field, there's definitely a lot of scope in things like this. I would also think the other thing to keep in mind is elder care. So, I mean, as you know, populations are increasing all over the world, but people usually fall into the trap of thinking this is because of a lot of babies that are being born or children that are being generated, but that's not actually true. The reality is most of the increase in population is mainly because people are living longer lives, right? So 2 generations ago, our families in India, the average age was probably, if you go back to the 1930s to 1950s, average lifespan was about 40 to 50 years. Right now, easily we're in the 70 to 80 and going even beyond that. So a lot of the population growth is actually because people are living longer lives, but there are going to be a lot of solutions needed in the future to help older people to live their lives better as well. So if you put it in this kind of a matrix and look at where your career is going and where your interests are, I think you will help yourself a lot to understand what your story is going to be in the next 10 to 15 years at least. So beyond that, it's almost impossible to plan. But if you have a general sense of direction based on this kind of idea, you're going to end up in a better place, in my opinion. I will get to another poll question, and yeah, Pinu, over to you again.
Sure. Just a minute. The second poll is on. Is there on the screen? Participants, please go ahead. Fifteen seconds more. All right, the poll has ended. Rakesh, can we have the answers? Yes. Answers are there on the screen, Anoop. Do you see that?
Yeah, I see it. Yeah. So it seems like of this group, the majority have something in mind, and roughly about it's split between some certainty and uncertainty between amongst those who are placed. So about 50-50 split between those who are pretty sure and that they found something that's worthwhile, and those who are not sure if it's the right thing that they're gonna do. Whereas the other half of that group, about 27, are looking for something. And then you have a decent amount of numbers who are looking into education and entrepreneurship. That's a pretty good mix of people. Cool. So I would then address the first, the ones who answered on D. I think probably you guys would need a bit more advice on what to do or what not to do. First thing I wanted to tell you is, I put the picture of the pyramid there because that's I think the Egyptians got something right. When you look at most corporate structures, it's pretty much a pyramid. You got to have a lot of people coming in at the bottom, and then a few make it to the top. And that's my message, is that you don't lose hope, because companies are gonna keep churning. People go in, people go out, and this happens pretty much throughout the year, COVID or no COVID, right? So you always have a chance to get in at the bottom as a junior employee or an intern. So even if it's not going to be paid, for example, if it's an unpaid internship, do take it up. But of course, put a time limit on it. You can't work for 1 year without pay. You could probably do it for 3 months or 6 months, but beyond that, it's not worth your while or worth your time. So the other message I would say, apart from keeping up hope, is understand the mathematics of probability, right? So when somebody says you have a 1% chance of getting a job, it basically means that 1% can happen anytime between 1 and 100, right? And that's the meaning of probability. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So you have to keep trying and just don't give up hope. One thing I have to say though and stress on is that, all of the other points are irrelevant if you don't have, or if you're not proficient with the technical knowledge, right? And then when you don't know something else, so be honest, right? Say you don't know, but offer something else. Say you know something else a lot better. So when you're in an interview and you're facing trouble with some questions or you don't know how to answer, don't try to fudge it. And just, you do yourself a lot of favor if you just say you don't know, but you can definitely offer an alternative and say, I'm not skilled enough in point A, but I can do digital signal processing a lot better. So if you have any difficult questions for me, then yeah, I can answer you on that. So think about that as a technique to use in your interviews. The second point is about having stories about your projects and accomplishments. So I had asked Binu to share a link to a video before, and I think that's very relevant to throughout as a theme throughout this discussion. You need to understand why you're doing something. And this makes your stories a lot more interesting, and it also gives you a lot of understanding on why you want to proceed in a particular job or career stream, etc. Now, looking back the last 4 years, the reasons why you got into engineering might have been very different. A lot of people, when nobody expects you to know at the age of 18 what your career is going to be. And you probably end up taking something because your friends are doing it, or your parents asked you to do it, or whatever, right? But going forward, it's all your decisions. It's up to you which direction you want to take it. It's not so much up to your parents. You got to show up at the office and work. It's not your dad or your mom. So you need to really understand why you're doing something. And be happy with your choice. You may not earn millions of dollars like your neighbor, but he's, on the other hand, he or she has given up also a lot of their work-life balance to earn a lot of money. So at the end of the day, be happy with your choice, but be very conscious about your choice as well. The third point that I want to suggest to you is to use the STAR framework when you're in interviews, and this is even valid in any of the future interviews for the next 10 years, right? So a lot of companies that I've worked with, they use this framework to talk about why they should hire you. And the question always starts with what was the situation or problem. The T is for the task. What was the task needed or the action needed to solve it? What was your part in that action? What did you do to influence, the directions that the team or the company took? And then finally, what was the result? And not all results are successes. It's impossible. But yeah, I mean, you have to understand what you learned if something failed. So I believe that this framework has always been super helpful to me. I hope that if there's one thing that you want to take away from this 1 hour on how to approach interviews, then you should take this with you. The fourth thing that I would suggest is be prepared with the stories. So I talked about stories. Think about it from a behavioral type of questions, right? So what were the challenges that you faced? How did you demonstrate ownership? Now, you guys don't have a lot of career achievements to talk about when faced with behavioral type questions. But so you really need to think about a broader point of view. You could definitely bring out instances from project teams that you worked in especially in your third or fourth year. You could even discuss any accomplishments in sports, for instance, and how you overcame that. At least in the early part of my career, you have probably an equal mix of examples from both your technical points of view, but also your extracurricular points of view. So don't be afraid to use it. As you would have seen in the video, people are interested in you and why they should hire you. They're not so interested in how many marks or grades you scored. At some point, it's important, yes, to know that you were able to read and write and memorize something and replicate it. But at the end of the day, it also comes down to who you are as a person and why, as a manager, I should hire you. And do I feel like I could get along with you as well? So don't be afraid to mention these examples. And lastly, I'm not sure if you can see that point, but it's basically have intelligent questions for the interviewer, right? So you need to be prepared for interviews and research your companies. I mean, for example, one intelligent question could be, okay, let's say I join your company, and what does success look like if I do, if I do everything right? What would a successful result look like? What would be the actions I would do and the results that I would get? So be prepared with that. I would then go into the next poll question.
Yes. Yeah, the poll question is on the screen. All right, the answers are there on the screen. Anoop?
Cool. So I think overwhelming favorite is worried about my technical competency, and then Next one is job growth, promotions, relations, and then earning, salary potential. Okay, cool. I think it's not surprising. I think everybody is in the same place. Nothing much has changed in 15 years. So I will go into this section here then. I think this curve pretty much defines my response to those who answered A, that you're worried about your technical competency. And then also from the prior poll question on you found the placement, but you're not sure if it's the right fit. I think this answers your question too. And I think this is pretty much familiar to, I would say, the reality for most people who start something new, especially after college, right? You're probably around here where this red circle is. You've learned a lot of stuff, many different topics and subjects across, in the last 4 years. You probably feel like, yeah, I've learned a lot of it, but is it really gonna be useful? And you're probably now gonna end up at point number 3 at some point. The point that I wanted to make is you need to very quickly get into the number 4 piece, where you have to say, okay, you're probably embarrassed about not knowing that much, but you need to get over that very quickly and realize that you need to start all over again. And the reality is this, when you get in a work environment, there's a lot of conflicting interests, there's a lot of goals that may not immediately make sense. Technical skills are only one aspect of it. And understanding that later on as you develop your career, you really need to understand or be an expert in what you're doing. And to get to that point, you need to very quickly understand that you have to start from scratch. You basically, to give you a story about my first introduction, let's say, to corporate life in Tesco, where it was a retail environment. I was developing a lot of business analytical tools, etc. But I didn't really know how the business was working. And my knowledge of, yes, I could create some cool charts and do some, build up some SQL or PL SQL code and manage the data warehousing and on stuff like that. And put everything together and create a nice report. But at the end of the day, someone in a superstore in the UK needs to understand what exactly to do with it, and for that to happen, you need to understand the problem. So it's a fact of life. So you need to pretty much start from scratch, and you need to understand the problem, the nature of the problem first. And to understand that, you need to understand what your business is doing and what the goals are. So you're gonna get into this number 4 scenario pretty quickly, be comfortable with that as quickly as possible, and then get to start learning very quickly. And this is a fact that is going to repeat over and over again when you switch jobs or switch companies. It's going to happen over and over, right? So you have to keep rolling the ball up the mountain. My only advice to you is then, in this case, apart from accepting the fact that you probably don't know much, is get into the learning mode ASAP. And the first 6 months are very crucial when you enter the company. You need to put in a lot of extra effort and make sure you not only work on things, get your hands dirty with actually hands-on applications, but talk to people as much as you can. Apart from your manager and your teammates, broaden your network, talk to whoever you can in the company and understand what's going on, understand where you can find solutions. You will be surprised that a lot of the problems that you can solve have probably already been replicated somewhere else in your company. So you just need to reach out to the right person and save yourself a lot of time. So focus on the big picture by reapplying solutions for the smaller problems that you will face. And that basically is an intro into my next slide, which should then answer the questions for those who think that, okay, I'm not I don't think I'm a right fit for the job, or I've found something and I'm gonna start soon, and potentially, again, I'm not sure where it's gonna go, etc. I would look at it through these three lenses. I mean, your success in your company comes down basically to these three factors. So the most important thing is your interest in what you're doing. I mean, what you know before and your knowledge you've gained is going to have a very limited impact on what your interest is, and the two are not very lightly related. So you may start from scratch with zero knowledge in something, but if you're really interested in it, you're gonna get up to like an expert level pretty quickly. So it all boils down to that. So the other point is your manager, especially in the initial part of your career. Who your manager is going to have a big influence on at least the first 3 or 4 years. And if you feel that it's not going well, then you probably need to reconsider your options. Now, in the culture part is also super important in every company. Every company has a very distinctive culture. And over here, by culture, I mean a lot of things, right? So it comes down to communication stuff. So how do you communicate with your team, with the broader organization? You will find that later on in your career, like from years 5, 6 onward, probably about 50% of your time is spent in communication, and culture therefore plays a very important role in it. You're going to be either in meetings or writing emails or listening to other people talk, right? So culture in that sense is super important. And how does the company reward success, or how does the company treat failures? Do they give them an option to succeed again? So all of these things come into culture. As well, what comes into play here is some kind of idea of work-life balance, right? So nobody wants to work on weekends or work over hours. Sometimes it's possible and you have to do it, but you don't want to do it 12 months out of 12. At the same time, you want to get paid for the benefits that you provide in terms of your skill levels and your knowledge, etc. So all of that as well goes into culture. How well does the company reward you? Now, as you can see, the middle part of that is very small, and that's the reality. There is no, in most cases, there is no perfect company. And certainly for me, I'm yet to find one, right? You get different parts of this in different companies. In my very first role in Huawei, I was outside of all of this. Although it was rather interesting, it was to build a voice protocol device, or rather a voice protocol software for use in telecommunication devices. It was broadly interesting, but it mainly meant a lot of like coding and basically typing stuff in Python, which was okay, but I didn't really find the overall nature of the job interesting. My manager and I mean, he was very bad at communicating targets and goals and developing my skills, so there was no fit there either. And from a cultural point of view, it was a very work-oriented culture. It meant that I had no time for any hobbies, even on weekends, right? So I was completely out of it in my first job. So I needed to make a switch, and did that. And I went into Tesco, where it was a little less technical, but it was a bit more heavy on the business side. So I could use both technical skills and learn business knowledge at the same time. My manager was okay. The culture was far better, not perfect, but far better than what I started with. So my advice to you is, if you don't see a fit immediately, and if you look at where you are in terms of this Venn diagram, then keep a plan B in place. I mean, don't leave immediately without nothing in hand, but definitely do some research, maybe do some courses on the side that will help you to get to plan B or plan C, right? So and I think this kind of perspective is going to be useful for you at every stage of your career. You need to understand that getting to that center and the middle part is going to be almost impossible. There is no perfect company except for the company that you create. as an entrepreneur. And even then, I mean, you have some rewards that you can decide how the company will look, but then you also have a whole other risk level, because you're also dealing with the potential of failure. So as long as you're working for somebody or working for some company, getting to that center point is going to be very hard and pretty much almost impossible. But it's possible in very rare cases. But to do that, you need to find it over time, or you need to become really an expert at what you're doing, and you need to. And to do that, my advice is to look for that, right? So understand what it is that you're really interested in, and keep pursuing that until you're an expert in it. And then all the other pieces will slowly fall into place. On that point, I would just jump into quickly what you can do now, skills that you can develop now without waiting. And for this, I think any kind of role that you're gonna take up in the next decade or 2 decades, doesn't matter where you're gonna be, if you're gonna be in mechanical engineering or electronics or computers, or even in a non-technical role, what everybody needs is a good level of data analytical skills. And I mean, the amount of data that's being put out in the world today just keeps on increasing, right, day by day. So, I mean, I put that example in there. If you look at it, if you're a mechanical engineer, you're looking at a process that's creating a product, and you just look at the average, you would think everything is fine, but actually wait, the third data point there. I mean, in a real world, such a data point might be, from a process point of view, suicidal, especially when you look at a supply chain or a mechanical process, right? So you need to really be proficient in your data analysis and statistics. And this is something you can do anytime on your own time. There's lots of material out there. Understand logical thinking, understand biases. So I've got 4 examples of biases there. So read up about it, understand how this will influence, how this has influenced your thinking so far. This will be really useful to you as you progress through your career. And definitely communication skills. Now, I don't know how many of you, I don't know all of your backgrounds, but definitely, I mean, you're already starting with an advantage where you probably at a decent level of English, so you're pretty much better off than a lot of the population in Southeast Asia and East Asia and so on, as well as large parts of other parts of the world. So that's definitely an asset, but knowing English is just one point. You need to also learn how to listen, learn how to argue constructively, and learn how to take feedback constructively as well. So not all feedback is necessarily negative. You should take it as something to build on and improve yourself. So as I mentioned before, right, so 50% of your time in a corporate world will end up being about communication. And this is even true if you're an engineer. You need to always end up talking to somebody about what the problems or advantages of a particular system or product is. And a lot of mistakes happen because the communication was not clear or not correct enough. So definitely something that you need to do to progress. So moving into what to do when you begin work. So as I said, take control of your story. So that's the refresh. It's your decisions from now on that will define your story. Also define for yourself what does success look like. Try and review it every 3 to 6 months. Don't be afraid or shy to ask for help. And that goes hand in hand with finding mentors. So for me, some of the most important inputs that I got were on my career or some projects were just talking to mentors. And by mentors, you should try and look for somebody that is probably as different from you as possible, but that you can still get along with, right? So by that I mean, let's say if you are working in IT and you are working on a specific project that's related to, let's say, traffic management, it doesn't harm you if you go out and talk to other people working on other projects, you will be quite amazed at how much synergies there are, or how much, for instance, material or products you can reapply to your project, or even different kinds of strategies and thinking that will make your life a lot better and make you more successful. And yeah, for me, in my early part of my career in Singapore, I tried to look for mentors who are as different from me as possible, from different countries, from different genders. So I looked for mentors who were women, or mentors who were from Japan or Korea, for instance, who could give me a different perspective on how to look at problems, or to approach my next moves in my jobs and so on. So definitely do that. And for that to happen, you need to also go networking. If you're slightly more on the entrepreneurial side, you definitely need a lot more networking. And as an entrepreneur, you should remember, I mean, you're probably looking for a problem that you want to solve, but it's as important that your investor also believes in you. So a lot of private equity or venture capitalists put their money more in a person that they believe in, even if the project or the product is not very well defined. I mean, over time, you can refine your product and your idea. It all comes down to how confident you are and how motivated you are. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, the probabilities of success are very dependent on outside factors as well that you can't influence. But to get to a certain level of accomplishment, you need people to believe in you, and for that, you definitely need to network. Be aware of cultural influences. Now, for instance, in most Asian cultures, we have a preference to be hierarchical. Like in India, it's a bit less, but if you move towards the eastern part of Asia, it becomes a lot more, where, for instance, societies in Japan or Korea or parts of China are a lot more hierarchical. So my point over here is, don't be afraid to voice your opinion. Don't be shy, right? If you see something that's obviously wrong, or if you see an idea that can be a great success, just say it. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not going to lose anything apart from losing a bit of face. But it's better to lose face and make mistakes than not to do anything at all. And lastly, I would say, learn about your company's business model. And by business model, I mean something like this. So this is an Amazon business model, where essentially you have the Amazon flywheel, for example. You know, the key objective of Amazon is to grow, right, and to grow the business and to grow profitability. And the way that they've figured out how to do that is to add a lot of sellers. So for instance, in India, if you're a seller and you want to sell something, you don't need to set up your own website. You just go to Amazon and you can be a seller yourself. And that's the way Amazon increases then their product selection. And by increasing their product selection, that means that as a customer, I can look for millions of products, and then it's very likely that I find something in the product catalog. And then that in turn, it drives a lot more online traffic. And with the online traffic, there's more sellers who come in, because when they look for a place to sell, they end up coming to Amazon. So that basically drives a lot of growth and volume. And with that growth, basically, you're able to lower your costs, because you have a lot of fixed costs, like the cost of your servers or the cost of your warehouses and fulfillment centers. That cost doesn't change, but you basically lower your cost per volume, and that basically helps you then to lower the cost of your products as well that you're selling. So that's a business model. So when you join a company, understand very clearly what is the business model of your company and where you fit in that. And that will help you to understand the bigger picture, and also to understand where the opportunities are in case you want to make a job switch to a different part of the company and so on. Right. So I think that was all the content I had for now. I think there was a question. So one of the poll questions was on salary and income over time. Well, I had also prepared this chart, so in case you were too worried. So this is a chart comparing three colleagues, right, who finished their engineering in 2006. and looking at where they are today in terms of income level. I haven't put the numbers in there because essentially that's confidential. But the key message that I wanted to give you here is that beyond a certain point, the money itself is meaningless, because you need to be really interested in what you're doing. And you need to spend the next 10 years or so understanding what it is that you're really interested in and becoming an expert in that. And beyond that time, beyond a certain income level, it doesn't really matter. There will be ups and downs in terms of your income levels, right? So for instance, you probably take a break to study further, or you would relocate overseas or relocate to a different city in India because your partner had to move, and then you're going to have a break in income and so on. So you need to be prepared for things like that. But broadly, as long as you are really interested in what you're doing and become an expert, you shouldn't really be worried, because at the end of the day, beyond like a few years of experience, companies are paying you for the knowledge that you have acquired and for how you can deliver successful projects. So really focus on that, and beyond a few years' time, you will see your income levels will grow significantly. The spike here is more for those, like, so for instance, for those who are taking an entrepreneurial side to things or joining startups, significantly, you will depend for a lot of your income on stock options, for instance. And yeah, the payout can be huge, right? So this is a friend who still works at SAP, SAP Labs, but he spent a lot of his time in the initial years working on a side project that finally was successful, and he sold his shares on it. So you see a big income jump there, but you should also realize that people only talk about the successes. There's a lot of failures as well. So when you take the risk of being an entrepreneur or being in a startup, yes, the reward can be high, but make sure that you also have something on the side that can sustain you, as this friend had. And yeah, I think the other point, the line in the orange, is a friend of mine who was very interested, who got a lot of really good projects initially, but then got burnt out. He took a 2-year break and then he started again. And the difference in the income levels here is because, of course, this line is in India and these two lines are outside. So obviously your income levels are very different, but remember that also the costs are very different. India is still much cheaper to live in than most overseas countries, right? So, but I would say all of us over here are equally happy. So it doesn't really matter where you are or how much you're earning, but what does success mean for you is basically going to end up being how interested are you in the job or the work that you're doing. So that was it from me, and that was all the content. So I'm going to hand over for any questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Anoop. That was fantastic. Sangeeta, are you there? Sangeeta, ma'am?
Yes, I'm here. Any more questions from any of the participants? Would you want to have a mic to ask a question? You can use the raise hand button there so that we know that if you have any questions to ask.
While we wait for the participants to send in their queries,
Yes.
we could start with some of ours. Sangeeta?
Yeah, Anoop, I think you ran us through, you refreshed me for my placement activities. It's been low for the last 3 months, but I think this is what we keep talking to the students. And when it comes from a graduate who's from an electronics and communication background, going and doing a master's in finance, you, I think, have showed the people that, so much of diversity that really exists. And it's for us to open our eyes and see what opportunities really exist in the world there, because sometimes we get bogged down with so much of our initial graduation that we get stuck. If I'm a computer science or a mechanical grad, I would say yes, I want to do only this core engineering. But today, using your engineering, you're using your engineering strengths, you are working on to a lead strategy into a finance position or so. So I think that's something that was very impressive to listen from you. I think we have a couple of questions here which is coming up saying, is COVID-19 stuff a boon? A lot of more opportunities. That's a question to you, Anoop.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, we went through a slide where we had, the 4 different sectors within which industries you could expect to do better and which more or less better. I mean, that was looking at it from a climate change perspective, but I mean, definitely you could reapply a lot of that to COVID, right? And obviously, in the near term, there's already been huge impacts on some industries, anything related to travel. I mean, if you're working for an IT firm that's doing travel, that's related to the travel industry, like bookings or search algorithms, etc., then obviously it's not a good time, and that extends on to some other sectors like commercial aviation and so on. At the same time, I think if you look at opportunities right now, obviously it's created also a lot of opportunities on the tech side. I mean, if you look at the US, at the stock indexes or the stock markets in the US, if you look at Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, these 4 companies together have grown so significantly that they make up, I think, 30% or more of all the market value in the US. So obviously there are opportunities. Probably you would see that to be a bit overweighted on IT at the moment. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities as well.
All right. Thank you so much. There's another question which says, what are your thoughts on being a generalist versus a specialist?
Yeah, I think it boils down to a lot to your attributes and strengths. I think it definitely, in my personal opinion, it makes sense to be a specialist, at least initially, early on in your career, because then you know a subject inside and out. And that will help you to, once you know your technical subjects really well and you've tested it in the real world, that will help you to build a base, to build more general skills. So it's very hard to be a technical, a specialist throughout your life in today's world, because the industries are changing a lot. So you need to be in a frame of mind where, I mean, especially in IT, things change a lot from year to year, right? I mean, when I was graduating in 2006, we were using Orkut. And right now you have something like TikTok. Orkut was the very old school version of MySpace or Facebook. I'm not even sure if you guys remember these names or know these names. But right now we passed through a phase where you had Facebook, for instance, which was heavily dependent on search and search advertising. And now you have a technology like TikTok, which is almost eliminating search and gives you content that you want without even using search, right? It's using some AI and machine learning to generate that content. So if you're in the IT space, things change a lot and very drastically. So you need to be a very good specialist if you're going to be in IT. On the other hand, if you were gonna, and that's basically true for many other technologies. If you're in mechanical engineering and you've developed all your skills in automobile engineering, for instance, in the next 20 years, you could theoretically expect a lot of changes because of electric vehicles, basically, and maybe some aspects of your automobile, a large part of it will stay the same, but significant aspects will change as well, and you need to be aware of that and adapt to that. So yes, it makes sense to be a specialist, but you need to be very focused and passionate about it. A generalist is not to say easier. You need to balance and be pragmatic with both sets. But yeah, in my point of view, it makes sense to start out as a specialist, understand where your interests are, and then if you feel like making a change to a generalist is better for you, then go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Anoop. That question was from one of our alumni, John Rodriguez, who's currently in the US, and he is precisely a mechanical engineer of 2016 batch. Uh, so we have another question. This is, I think, from our fourth year student, Crystal D'Souza. She's asking, is a degree in business essential in the corporate world? Why did you make a transition to finance?
Yeah, so for me, I'll start off with the second question. So for me, finance both my parents were bankers, so I already had some interest in it. And it boiled down to, why did I even take engineering at some point? I mean, yes, it was not super difficult. I liked the numerical aspect of engineering. I liked the analytics of it. But at the end of the day, I felt for me that as a finance person, I could make a bigger impact on product or a company and so on. And for me, that was validated by some of my achievements, right? So for instance, in Amazon in Singapore, I was the one who was working with the broader team. So I'm talking to supply chain managers, I'm talking to commercial or marketing managers, and I'm talking to IT and engineering to understand what kind of products are available, and then put that whole story together to understand how we can make a profitable business, because you're almost starting off by running a business with losing tons of money, like millions of dollars a year, but you can't do that forever. And an engineering person can give you part of the solution, but the other parts of the solution comes from other people in the organization, from marketing, from supply chain, on their costs and strategies, etc. And as a finance person, I felt I could make a big impact by putting all that together and put the whole story together and delivering value. And another example would be when I was working on a China project for a shampoo business with Procter and Gamble. Now there was a big engineering project on making a streamlined packaging solution that could be used for the whole world. And China was, of course, the biggest market, so it needed to work in China first. So the proposal was to come up with a bigger bottle that could be used in the store, in the supermarkets and so on, and that would deliver some cost savings over time. But as a finance person, I really was able to go deep into the numbers. I uncovered problems in terms of the capital expenditure, that it was going to be a lot higher than what the engineering team initially proposed. And then I put that into my model and said, okay, this project doesn't work out. It's delivering negative value. So basically, you would lose money over time than actually make money. And then that basically triggered off a whole series of research. And when the marketing team did a consumer research, for instance, they realized finally that the new bottle that they would make was going to be so much bigger that the average Chinese woman couldn't even fit it in her hand. So basically, it was quite useless from a consumer point of view. Right, so that basically killed the project, and helped save a lot of useless investments. Right, so as a finance person, I'm able to step in and drive decisions in the right direction, while keeping some of my previous strengths. Is a degree in business essential? Yeah, I would think at the moment it still is, but it depends. I mean, I would say you need to go into a business degree with some relevant experience. Like, I wouldn't suggest that you do it straight after engineering. I would suggest that you get some real world experience for a few years and then see if it's the right time to make a switch. And then when you do the switch as well, make sure that it's a degree that gives you obvious benefits. Your risk is going to dictate a large extent also your reward, right? So if you go into a B school that's very easy to get into, you're not going to get a lot of rewards for it either. So you need to understand what level of risk. Obviously you need to pay for it, so you need to understand how much risk you're going to take, and make that decision. So a large part of the benefits from a business degree actually will come from the network that you will build there. So that's an important thing to keep in mind.
All right, Anoop, there is one more. There is one that's from an alumni, Michael, from the class of 2010, and he writes in this: Hey Anoop, I was a project manager for an oil and gas service firm. A total of 7 years of work experience since graduation. I've not been working for the last year and would want to switch careers now, obviously, to have a work-life balance. Finance is the option I am taking now, as my knowledge is limited and I'm interested in it. Pursuing the US CMA as of now, do you think the approach is good in the present situation, or do you think I should not switch careers?
Sorry, I didn't get the last two sentences, Binu. Apologize. Can you repeat?
Yes. Michael is pursuing the US CMA.
Okay.
I'm not sure what that is. It is something based on finance, if I'm right. Pursuing the US CMA as of now. Do you think the approach is good in the present situation, or do you think I should not switch jobs now?
Well, I think I don't know what CMA is, but I mean, oil and gas, moving away from it. I mean, either of your own choice or being forced to. I think you have to take it in the broader picture is probably the right thing to happen. So I'm not sure then if you're switching to something else out of oil and gas. In that case, I would say it seems like the right move at this point in time. And to be fair, I mean, when you're making a career switch like this, without a lot of detail, it's hard to give you a clear answer. But essentially, you need to understand what are the strengths that you're carrying from your previous job that you can reapply. And if you don't see a lot of strengths that you can reapply, then you should rethink which career you're going into. Now, if you're coming from an oil and gas background, understandably, you would have some amount of experience in a manufacturing setup or in a supply chain setup, or potentially in a technical analysis setup as well. So you need to consider where you could reapply it and do it. Now, I would say, I mean, to give you a very drastic example, if you're not sure, if music is your passion and you want to go and pursue music, I would say, okay, that's a very risky move because there are not many successful DJs out there. And you need to be like in the top 0.1% to be successful. But if you're making a career switch to a stream that has some strengths that you can reapply very easily and quickly, then you shouldn't have a problem at that point. But making too many switches is also not too good. So I have instances where I've seen a friend or two where they change jobs every 1 or 2 years in completely unrelated sectors, and then 10 years down the line, you might end up being stuck where you're not sure where you're going, or if you want something, employers may not be confident enough because of all the frequent career switches. So it's good to take a switch, but when you do, I would say keep a checklist of what are the strengths you can reapply from your previous job, and if there are at least a few that would be that have synergies, then you're probably in the right direction.
All right. Anoop, CMA is certified management like accountant.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, management accountancy is a good skill to have, and definitely something that you could use. Again, I mean, keep in mind, how much of it can be automated, right? There's a lot of work going on globally and across the world on automating accounting procedures and processes. Or a lot of accounting jobs have been outsourced to low-cost or lower-cost countries like the Philippines and China as well. So that there's a lot of that going on. So understand what you can do with it. If you see a path where with the management accountancy you can then you can get into a corporate job in an energy industry, yeah, that might work. But if you want to go into management accounting and you're not sure what you're going to do with it, that probably is not the right frame of mind.
All right. Thank you, Anoop, for that. I've got one more from Alumni, and it goes like this. Can you shed some light upon the future of systems engineering? Do you think it will become obsolete soon?
Sorry, what was that? Solutions of system engineering?
Could you shed some light upon the future of systems engineering? Do you think it will be obsolete soon?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, it finally boils down to which industry it's going to be a part of. I mean, I showed you the slide earlier on which sectors you could expect to grow a lot, right? And I mean, if you talk about systems engineering, I mean, there's going to be some industries that are going to be that require a lot of innovation. When you talk about the healthcare industry, you're going to need to have medical devices that are a lot more advanced and need to be cheap, right? And when you talk about innovations that India needs, for example, people in India are getting richer every year, over the years. Certainly, I mean, and they use up. They're very world aware. They're very globally conscious of what's going on. At some point in time, people in India, or consumers in India, are also going to want to have the solutions that you see in the West here. So I'll give you a personal example. So here in Germany, where I am, almost every house has an automatic dishwasher, right? But in India, like 10, 20 years from now, when people want to have automatic dishwashers, you can't have the same solution that people in Europe have, because firstly, it's super expensive. It takes up a lot of energy and power consumption. And you need to have a different kind of mechanism than what people in Europe have, because you have different kinds of utensils and so on. So you definitely need a different kind of system to work for a country like India than you have in the West. So there's obviously going to be a lot of demand for these roles. The question you should ask is more in which sector or what problem is it that you're going to solve, and that should help guide you. So I have time for one more question only, unfortunately, because I have to get back to work.
Sure.
So maybe if there are more questions, and Bino has suggested, you could probably collect them by email, and then I could answer them.
Definitely. I'll do that. Fantastic. Yeah, that's correct. Sangeeta ma'am, shall we
Yes.
get the session?
Yes. So my dear students and the alumni who are there as a part of this event today, I think all of you must have gathered a great insight on how the world is looking forward to, and what is it that you really need to gear up to get onto these, work profiles or your choices in life beyond engineering. Say it be an entrepreneurial role, take up a job, or you're looking at masters as a, next a move in your life then. Thank you, Anoop. You being from the batch of 2006, our first batch of engineering grad from the Department of Electronics and Communications, going on to do your master's in finance. I think you can be a role model to many of our students. Thank you for this insightful session. And as I said, you really refreshed my placement strategies and things that I really put in my presentations, especially the competency-based interview, the STAR framework, because I have worked for a German MNC and I know this is pretty much prevalent in most of the organizations that they look at, and it's an important concept of interview processing as well. I would also like to thank Dr. Binu, being the facilitator, Mr. Satyendra Bhatt, the chairperson of Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group at SJC, and Ragesh sir for being the media coordinator for this event. I, Sangeeta, the placement officer and also the moderator for this event, would like to sign off. Thank you, Anoop, and look forward to having more sessions with you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening and weekend. Glad to be of help.
Thank you, Anoop.
Bye.
Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Binu. Bye.
I'll speak to you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.